Duchesne County is located about halfway between Salt Lake City and the Utah-Colorado border. So up toward Dinosaur, about a 3.5-hour drive from here. We have about 20,000 people spread over about 2 million acres. It's kind of a playground for folks in the Salt Lake area to come out and recreate. We have lots of reservoirs and lakes, and we have mountains and forests for people to recreate. Land's pretty cheap out there. You can pick up land for about $1,000 an acre, and so a lot of people come out there and buy land, and they want to get away from it all. They want to get away from the Wasatch Front and the urbanization. So that sets us up automatically for some problems when oil and gas development starts coming into the area. When the Mormons came to the Salt Lake Valley in 1847, shortly thereafter they sent a search party or an exploration party out into the Uinta Basin. And when they came back from that trip, they reported back to the prophet Brigham Young that whole area is a vast wasteland that's good for nothing but nomadic purposes and maybe to hold the rest of the world together. And so there wasn't a lot of hope for our area being settled. It was open to homesteading in 1905, and we became a county in 1915, so we're celebrating our centennial this year. And we've become the #1 oil-producing county in Utah. We have lots of good scenery with mountains and streams. A lot of people come out here, like I said, to recreate. It's a good place to raise a family, regardless of whether it's human or animal. And this was taken in the winter, so you can see some snow on the ground and some of that ozone forming in the background. We claim that it comes from all the Mormon moms in Salt Lake City running around in their minivans, taking their 10 kids to church and piano lessons and soccer games. So it comes into us and then blows into Colorado. Also, we're a good camping area where you can get up close and personal with wildlife. And also a very popular hunting area. So we have all those things going on for us. And historically, most of the oil and gas development, it's been scattered around the county, but the real heavy-duty development was going on out in the BLM lands where it's just nothing there to really cause a problem. We've been the #1 oil producer since at least 2008. And that kind of shows you some of the area on the BLM country where there really is not a lot of conflict or impacts. But with some of the changes in the federal policies, it's becoming more and more difficult to drill on those federal lands. And a lot of the producers are moving off of the federal lands and onto private lands. I think right now we have about 1/3 of our production on federal lands, about 1/3 on tribal lands, and about 1/3 on private land now. And a lot of people that bought that private land, they don't understand the concept of the split estate. They think that when they paid that $1,000 an acre for that property that they got everything. They don't realize that they don't own any mineral rights in a lot of cases. So our production has been booming. We've had 6 years in which the production has exceeded 10 million barrels a year, with 2014 being up around 19 million barrels. And I noticed that was just under what the whole state of Colorado produced in 2003. The oil boom that we've experienced in the last few years, about the last 6 years, led us to be one of the fastest growing counties in the nation. But in terms of the real numbers, we've went from maybe 17,000 to 20,000 people is all. But it's been pretty fast growth in terms of percentages. And again, like I said before, the amount of production has been shifting off of federal leases and onto private lands. And when I came to Duchesne County in 2004, I saw my first oil well. I was born and raised in Washington and worked most of my career in Washington and Oregon, and I didn't see a single oil or gas well in either one of those two states. So it's been a steep learning curve for me. 2004, Duchesne County allowed anything to do with the energy industry as an outright permitted use. There was no special permits for anything if it was related to oil and gas. However, as the wells started coming off of the federal lands and onto the private lands, we enacted an ordinance back in probably about 2008 that required a conditional use permit for wells when they were on properties that were zoned for potential lots down in the 2.5 acre or below sizes. That didn't cover all the county, and then the other part of it was the agricultural industry started seeing these oil wells popping up either in their fields or on the edges of their fields. And so we had the people with recreation lands that were getting concerned about the lack of regulation from the county. The farmers were concerned about the oil wells coming out, so we're all standing there with our hands in our pockets wondering what to do next. So the county, we started on a process to try to regulate, because you get some of these impacts in the communities. You get some of the tanks that start rusting away. You get spills on the ground. You have fires. About the time we were looking at our new regulations, we had a blowout and a fire, and we had to evacuate people within a quarter mile of the well. So this was one of those things where lightning struck. They didn't have the protection on those tanks, obviously, and this happened within about a quarter mile of the little town of Altamont, where El Paso is king. And then, you start seeing all these mama bears coming to county commission meetings. This one happened to be up in North Dakota. But, we had the same thing happen with us. We allowed oil wells within 660 feet of a home. And this gal was saying, that's not enough. We want to see, at least 1,000 feet away. And we had the same thing with our folks in our county. So in 2011, we started looking at changing our land use code to try to strike a balance between the rights of the mineral owners and the rights of the surface owners, and try to regulate oil and gas development a little better than what we were doing before. So our pre-2012 ordinance required a 660-foot setback from a home, but only applied in those higher density zoning categories. And that included areas that had culinary water connections, were considered to be an R1 zone. And so we issued a lot of conditional use permits for oil and gas wells at that time. Tried to use that process to help the operators and the owners do some coordination and mitigation, and try to work things out without it getting too far out of hand. And like I said, those pre-2012 regulations were not popular with the surface owners, as more oil wells are moving off of federal land onto private. So we did go through quite a public hearing process, and we had a lot of help from the Utah Oil and Gas Association, Petroleum Association. We had help from the main operators in our area are Newfield, Bill Barrett Corporation. Many of you may know Doug Dennison with BBC. He helped us quite a bit with what we were doing. We also have Devon Energy, Berry Petroleum. Those are some of the main players there. So we all kind of got together and worked through this process for a year or so. We looked at what the impact would be of maintaining a 660-foot setback around the county would be in different typical rural residential areas. We looked at what would happen if we upped that to a 1,000-foot setback that a lot of people were advocating for. And that made it pretty tough to get to the minerals in a lot of cases. Berry Petroleum submitted this map prepared by one of their engineers that showed if we had that 660-foot setback from a home. This is in one of those recreation areas in the west part of our county. A lot of people from Salt Lake come out there to stay for the weekend. It would make it really tough to access the minerals in that area. Doug Dennison provided us with some things that happened over here in Colorado with potential mitigation measures. I have yet to see this done, where they pile up the haystack to try to block the oil well from some of the surrounding neighbors, but I guess that would be a good block to mitigate impacts. Building fences or walls around the facilities, another idea. The other thing we looked at was a lot of people said, well, they can directional drill quite long distances, you know, up to 2 miles is what we heard. And so why not just minimize the number of wells and let them directional drill for 2 miles? So we looked at the history of directional drilling in our county. This is a sample township that shows where the well site is and the downhole location. And this is a map of a lot of our oil field area that shows that really you're not seeing a lot of directional drilling that kind of distance. It really is not that financially feasible. So we took those kind of things into consideration. And the rest of the slides are kind of a summary of what our regulations are that we came up with. And the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining in Utah, they regulate the locations of the wells. We try to minimize surface disturbance to reduce impacts on ag lands and other resources in the county. We don't have a process where people pay a fee to put in an oil well to our county. I know some counties have a systems development charge of, I've heard as much as $18,000 per well. We don't have that, but we do try to have the energy industry work with our public works and road department folks to minimize the impacts on our road system. We try to get the wells in above ground facilities painted to blend in with the surroundings based on the BLM color palette, with the drill site owner having a say in that. We try to regulate lighting so that lighting from the wells is not shining into someone's bedroom and causing a problem. Try to have dust controlled in accordance with Utah codes, and also sanitary facilities so that people are not going to the bathroom on the well pad for everyone to see during the day. Staking is a big issue. Some people will come out to their property and they'll find stakes, and they'll call us and, you know, what in the heck's going on? What are these stakes for? And to try to get around that, we require the operators to notify the surface owners before they do staking instead of having those surprises. We try to regulate noise and require electric engines on the wells when they're within 660 feet of a dwelling and if power is available. The minimum setback, the absolute minimum setback we allow is 300 feet. And some people do allow that because they don't want the oil well going out into their productive farm fields. And so we do have a few that are that close. We also try to locate the well site equipment that's above ground as far away from the homes, maybe get it on the opposite side of the well pad from the home. Try to have the operators educate the surrounding residents about the dangers of H2S gas, and also try to get the homes within at least 660 feet away, if we can at all possible. Now, if the well is on the property that's owned by the owner of the drill site, the surface use agreement pretty much governs. However, if we have a neighbor who is not on the property where the oil well is being drilled, they too have a say. If they have a home within 660 feet of a well that's on someone else's property, the owner is required to give them 45 days notice before they submit their application for a permit to drill to dog them, and discuss how to mitigate the impacts of that well on that off-site owner. So we try to get them together to talk about noise, lighting, dust, site security, emergency notification, location of roads, and try to work those things out before the well goes in. The off-site owner has 15 days from the date of that contact to respond, and hopefully they can work it out and mitigate. If not, then we encourage them to mediate their differences, and that usually happens with the Division of Oil, Gas, and Mining. We still require a conditional use permit in the parts of the county that have the higher densities, and we try to make that a pretty quick process, and we notify property owners within 300 feet, and I make those decisions, but there is a possible appeal to the Planning Commission if someone does not agree with my decision. So doesn't apply to current or pending leases. So if you put in a well and someone builds a house within 300 feet, they don't have those same protections as if the home was there first. So this is kind of the way our code works. We have an oil and gas liaison now in our county. She hated this picture because she said it made her look fat, but I used it anyway. And I think she's been over to some of your meetings to see how the community process works. And she's doing a great job being that liaison between the owners and the energy industry. And I know she takes a lot of phone calls from people that just don't understand that split estate situation, or if they're having a problem with lighting or noise and that kind of thing. We also have had a big issue with the evaporation ponds. When I first got there, we had a lot of smell situations. We found out that if we can get that water circulating, usually with a pump on all four corners of the pond, get the right kind of biological agents in there, that water would turn from black to green and it wouldn't smell anymore. However, we have adopt some regulations on those as well. Try to get the odors controlled and also get them separated from the nearest dwellings by at least 2 miles. So if anyone has any questions about what we've done in Duchesne County, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards or respond to any questions now.